So good morning. Welcome to Stepping Up Kosher. I think it's lesson number 15. And last week we started the laws of milk and meat, but we really only just got our toes wet. We started off by giving the general source for it in the Torah, giving some of the rationalization, some of the explanations given for why we do this mitzvah that have been given by sages throughout the ages. And then we went into establishing 8 cardinal principles with regards to milk and meat. Right, kind of these foundational principles. And now we're going to start to get into the weeds. So today, the general theme of today's lesson, it's going to be a shorter lesson than usual. We're going to end at 10:30. It's already 10:15. But the general theme of today's lesson is we are going to talk about separation between meat and milk. Different things that we do to separate our vessels, to separate our foods. Some of them are going to be halachic, laws, legal obligations. And some of them are going to be more kind of like, over the years, people have kind of become more and more stringent and try to find ways to separate milk and meat. Okay? So let's start with bread. Lechem. Cutting it and touching it. Okay? The proper thing to do is to designate a knife that should be a bread knife. If you don't have one in your house, you should have a bread knife in your house. That bread knife should not be used to cut milk or meat. Very often what people have in their houses is they'll have a green knife, a red knife and a blue knife. So that would be one for meat, one for milk. And then they'll have a separate one, maybe a green one for parav, or maybe a black one just for bread, or whatever it is, right? Why is this? This is in order that we shouldn't make a mistake and use a knife that was just used to cut meat, and therefore has still some of the grease or the oil that might not be visible to the eye, right? You rinse it off in water. But then maybe there's still a little bit of grease on it, and you don't realize. So maybe from cheese, maybe from butter, right? Maybe from meat. And then you're going to use that to cut bread, and now that bread, which, as we all know, bread is the most common thing that you're going to eat with both meals, right? You have a big loaf, and you slice off a piece every day, and over a few days you finish a whole loaf. So by doing that, you'll end up eating milk and meat. Same thing, we should be careful with dirty fingers. This is very, very common when cooking. So let's say you're making some meat dish, and you have bread, and you're going to take off a piece of bread from the thing. Be careful that your fingers should not go straight from touching greasy meat or greasy cheese or whatever it is, and then use those same fingers to touch the bread, because then you make that bread either meat or milk, right? Fleishig or milchig as it's called, and then if you use that bread for the other one, then you're in trouble, right? Okay. The same thing, it is appropriate to have a knife that is designated for cutting vegetables and fruits. Why? Same thing. You don't want to be taking a knife that was used to, right? I don't know if you have to repeat this just like we did last time, but you have a knife, you cut meat, and then you use that to cut, let's say, an orange, right? And then you're going to use half the orange now, and half the orange you'll eat later with milk. So that's another thing to be careful about. This is especially true when it comes to sharp foods, right? So let's say cutting an onion, right? This is very, very common, especially if you live alone at home, especially if you live, welcome Malina, good to see you, and welcome back from Israel. Welcome back from Israel. Malina, we're happy to have you here. So this is especially true when you're cutting sharp foods. An onion, especially if you live alone at home, or maybe 2 people at home, 3 people at home, whatever it is, right? You're not finishing a whole onion just because you made yourself a little omelet. You diced up a little bit of an onion. You want to use the rest for later, right? If you cut that onion with a milk knife, let's say a knife that you also use for butter or a meat knife, then now that whole onion, because it's sharp, remember the taste goes into the whole onion. We spoke about that last week. So that's why it's good to have a designated knife that you use to cut fruits and vegetables. Again, like I said, common practice these days is that people will use a red knife for meat, a blue knife for milk, and they'll have a separate green one, which is what they use to cut fruits and vegetables if it's not going into a meat or a milk dish, etc., or bread or things like that. So that's what people call parav. Okay, spices, right? So spices can be used to go into a meat dish and a milk dish. Nothing really wrong with that. However, you have to be careful. What is that? Anybody want to hazard a guess? What do you have to be careful with spices? Let's say salt. You have one big jar of salt. They come in these big containers now, right? You know what I'm talking about? The big, right? What do you have to be careful about?
Putting your fingers in, like taking the salt.
Oh, yes. I'm assuming that you're shaking the spice container, though, right? Because that's usually how we do it. So, yeah, you're right. If it's like salt where you're sticking your fingers in, you have to be careful. The same thing we just said with bread. But what else? Yes?
The container itself.
Okay, but the container is not food. So you can touch with milk cans and meat hands, and even if the container is tray from the outside, that's fine. There's a much bigger worry, which is if you're, the better thing to do is to wash your hands. You're correct, but it's not really a halachic issue. The real issue is when you're cooking. When you're cooking, right? I don't know if anybody here can see my tea. Can you guys see my tea on Facebook? You see the steam coming up? That steam can be milchig or fleishig. right? So let's say, for example, you're cooking yourself a wonderful omelet. It's going to be a mushroom, onion, pepper, vegetable omelet, beautiful, and you're going to have cheese in it, right? So you have a nice cheesy omelet. It's cooking away on the stovetop, and you're like, oh, I didn't put in salt yet. You take the salt shaker and you shake it over the thing. Now, steam from this cheesy dish is going into your salt shaker. So you have a couple of options. Number one is, right? Let's just give this option. That's it, right? The best option is to put the spice, salt, garlic, pepper, whatever it is, inside your hand, and then take from there and sprinkle it on top. It's a good idea anyways, by the way, because we've all been in that situation where you're sprinkling something on top of something and then the cap falls off, the whole garlic goes in there. Yeah, does that only happen to me? I'm sure it happens to everybody. And so that's a good idea anyways, but certainly for kosher reasons, taking salt, you can be right next to the pot, that's fine. Pour a little mound in your hand, then take with your fingers and kind of sprinkle it over as much as you want, and the rest, either you go like this over the dish if you need it all, or if not, you do it over the sink, and that's it. Another option technically would be, and I know in my mother-in-law's house they have this, to have a designated garlic or a designated salt or a designated pepper, whatever it is, one for meat, one for milk. That is, I think, for most houses impractical, but for some houses it is practical. Like I know in my mother-in-law's house, they're constantly doing it. There's a lot of kids around, etc. They don't want confusion, so they put them on the. They have in the milk cabinet. They'll have a salt and a garlic because that's like what they use the most often in their omelets or whatever. Anyways. All right, everybody with me? Okay. Tablecloths, right? It is proper to have two separate tablecloths, one for meat, one for milk, and to use them alternatively. Now, this is not necessarily necessary, right? Technically, if you take your tablecloth and you wash it in between, I think I should clarify that there's different types of tablecloths. For example, here at Chabad, we use only material tablecloths, right? And these material tablecloths, for the most part here, they're usually meat, but every once in a while we have a milk event. We just make sure they're washed. If it's washed, you're good to go. You wash it in a washing machine, you're good to go. However, there are plastic tablecloths. You ever seen those, right? Even if they're like material, but they have like a gloss on top of them. Yeah. And you don't really wash those. You kind of just like wipe them down and move on, right? You should definitely have a designated one for meat and a designated one for milk. And even when it comes to the cloth ones, it's a good idea to have designated ones for meat and milk, if you can, just to be extra careful. Yes?
When I do like my Shabbat table is always meat, right? Mm-hmm. So I have a piece of plastic on it all the time.
Oh, there you go.
I don't have to worry. But if I do have, like, I want to eat breakfast there at
mm-hmm.
the Shabbat table,
right?
I have extra cut plastic, and I just put another plastic.
Very good.
Does that work?
That absolutely works. Yeah, and many people have placemats.
That's cold breakfast.
Yes,
is always Shabbat.
Many people will have maybe not into tablecloths at all. Yeah. They'll just have placemats, milk placemats or meat placemats, and their table is the other one.
Yeah.
Let's say their table is meat, and then they use milk placemats for when they're using milk. I want to add something else, which is, that's what it's just a funny habit that you often see in religious homes, Jewish homes, is that on Shabbat morning, so Shabbat afternoon they put down a tablecloth, right? For Shabbat, especially, it's beautiful, etc., right? A new one for Shabbat, it actually talks about it in the Talmud, when it talks about when the angels come on Friday night and they bless the home, they come home from shul and we say Shalom Aleichem to greet them. One of the things it says that they do is they see the house. Right? And one of the things it looks for is the tablecloth on the table. And when they see that, they say, oh, this is so beautiful, and the home should always be this peaceful and serene, etc. Okay? Anyways, let's move back to our topic. An interesting idiosyncrasy, if you will, you see often in Jewish homes, is that they put down a tablecloth on Friday afternoon, then Friday night comes, and people are eating all over the place, and they're having their meat meal, maybe they have a little leftovers in the kitchen table, etc. So on Shabbat morning, very often you see this. Which is people, the tablecloth is kind of half revealed in one little corner, and someone's having their coffee and their chocolate and their cereal and the milk or whatever it is, because obviously the tablecloth is meat, and even if that tablecloth maybe gets washed all the time, but certainly from Friday night to Shabbos day it's not getting washed, right? So they'll often have that done. Just an interesting explanation maybe for something you've seen before. All right, let's talk about dish towels. Yes, we should have separate dish towels for meat and for milk and for parv. The same thing is for all cleaning materials. Sponges, are you kidding me? Under boiling hot water. Right? Some people maybe they only wash with cold water because they're worried about their dishes, whatever. But very often we wash with hot water, scalding hot water sometimes even, right? You wear gloves. Some people wear dishwashing gloves in order to protect their hands. And now you're going to use the same brush to wash milk and meat and grease from a thing. And even if it's not something that is hot, but you're going to scrub with your brush, and some grease will go onto the brush, and then you're going to go scrub the other one with it, right? From meat to milk, and milk to meat, both things can be greasy. Cheese can be greasy, butter can be greasy, meat obviously is greasy. So we want to make sure that we separate that. Okay. Come again?
You need a parve sponge also.
Yes, because if you're going to have parve dishes, which is, as we mentioned, a good idea to have a designated, for example, knife for meat and a knife for milk, right? And then also have a knife for bread, which the bread is going to be used for parve for both of them. Then you now need to have a parve sponge to reflect that. Yes, and usually this is not a halachic ruling, but usually the colors are red, green, and red, blue, and green.
Yeah.
So red for meat,
Green is
blue for milk. Good morning, Yosef. Join us right there.
And green.
And
fish.
green for parve. Green for parve, for anything that's parve. Something you use for fish, you use it for bread, you use it for whatever. For onions that you're going to use with both.
There's another thing is like a grater. You definitely
Yeah,
need
absolutely.
different graters, because if you use one grater for cheese,
That's how I grew up.
you can't
Yep,
use it with
absolutely.
meat.
That's how I grew up. We had a special grater for cheese. We used that for cheese, making a grilled cheese. You know, you put a piece of bread with ketchup or sauce or whatever, right? And then we would grate cheese over it. Today they sell the mozzarella pre-shredded. Heaven forbid you should have to shred it yourself, right? But when I was growing up, and maybe they still sold shredded cheese, maybe my mom just didn't like it. We used to have the big blocks of cheese. We'd buy a big block. Either you're slicing off because you're having it, whatever, or you'd grate it off. You'd have a milk grater, right? Joseph, you want a coffee? Good morning, welcome. A coffee, something. There's coffee, tea here. There's breakfast here. Help yourself. All right, let's keep talking about salads. Yes, salads. So if you serve a salad, you serve it together with a milk or meat dish. You have to be careful, right? So ideally, those salads, if they're served with one dish, should not be served with the other dish. The only way is, halachically this is allowed, if you're very careful with it. So let's say, for example, you bring a bowl with a spoon, with a serving spoon, and you have your salad inside, and you serve it at the table, and then that's designated for the salad. So, for example, you're not going to use that spoon to then mix around the meat, you know? Sometimes at the Kiddush here at Chabad, I think about it. Obviously at Chabad, we're very careful that the whole Kiddush is basically just meat, right? But you often see one person is taking one salad, and the other person wants to take the same salad, and they're like, why should I wait? They grab the serving spoon from one salad, use it for the other salad, right? Which is totally fine, halachically, right? But if you're taking from a meat dish and using it for a salad, that salad now becomes meat. Right? You have to be worried that there's a little bit of meat inside of it. So therefore, okay. I didn't finish my thought, but therefore, it's good to have, if you would like to serve the salad with milk and meat, which is not the best practice, in other words, serve it with milk and then serve it later with meat, your leftover salad, then you should only do so if you have a designated spoon for it that is not a meat spoon, that's kind of a part of spoon and part of dish, and everybody's using that separately.
Can you use gray instead? I bought a lot of gray things, and I used that.
Absolutely, I said that's not. It's just the way things have landed in the religious world. It's not really. There's no actual significance to that.
Well, that way I remember that it's part of it. It's
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. So people use green, and you can use gray. It's not a problem. Okay. Let's talk about someone who is fleishig. All right. So fleishig means a person who ate meat. We haven't spoken yet about the waiting, right? But there is a waiting period that you're supposed to do between, I'm trying to look when we're doing that. That's the next topic. That's next week's topic.
It's interesting. I've never heard a person being referred to as flesh.
Okay, well, let me tell you. A person is fleishig for 6 hours after they eat meat. It doesn't mean that you can't eat them together with milk, although that's probably also a good idea. Marilyn's looking at me like, was that a serious point? She doesn't know when I'm serious when I'm joking. You shouldn't eat a fleishig person together with milk. You shouldn't eat even a pirate person together with milk, okay? Let me make it very clear. We do not encourage cannibalism here at Chabad. Okay. But a person is fleishig, meaning that they're not eating milk right now. Right now they're in meat status because they're waiting 6 hours. Or after milk, we wait 1 hour, right? So then, and we'll talk all the details about that next week. Because next week we're going to talk about the differences, right? But let's say somebody ate meat, and he's still within the 6 hour period, right? Is he allowed to eat, to cook milk? What do you think?
No.
The answer is yes.
Oh, yeah.
He's allowed to. No problem. He's allowed to cook milk things. What?
You can cook it, but not eat it yourself.
Exactly. Cook it but not eat it yourself. Now, you would think, doesn't it seem so
It's
like...
dangerous.
And doesn't it seem so like halacha? No, obviously he has to wash his hands, right? And you know, whatever
You have to be very
else he's
cautious.
used.
It would be easy to...
Very good. So that's what we're saying. So he says when... Oh, good morning, Leah. He says we're not worried that he might forget and take a little piece from the milk dish and pop it into his mouth while he's fleishig. But if you often do that, like if you know he says, generally, halachically, there's no prohibition on that because we're not worried that you're going to pop something into your mouth while you're fleishig and you're cooking milk and you're going to pop something into your mouth. However, if you constantly do that, if you very, very commonly do that, so then you should be careful and not to cook a milk dish while you meat, because for you, this is a thing. This is an issue. Good morning, Leah. You finished with that? Hi. You want to say hello to all of our friends? People on Facebook are going to be very happy to see you. We very often get comments from people on Facebook that they're happy to see you. You want to say hi to everybody? Morning, you finished your little nap?
Hi, sweetie.
All these people were in here when you went to sleep, right? It was just Hattie. Now all these people are here. Okay, let's wrap up because I'm going to teach Hebrew school in a moment. And the students are coming in just a few moments. Okay, obviously we should wash our hands between touching meat and touching milk. That's pretty straightforward. Okay, let's talk about pouring boiling hot water. All right, and again, these are all, what we're doing today is just precautions for separating between meat and milk. Okay, so here's another one. Pouring hot water, boiling hot water. You should be careful when you pour boiling hot water from the tap. Okay, so this is something I don't really need to be worried about because in my house, the hot water tank, we don't have a tankless hot water, we have a regular tank. And you know how you can set the setting? We have it on pretty low. I'm pretty, well, I guess high, I don't know, but pretty low. In other words, it never gets too hot. The reason for that is because of her and our other children, right? In the bath, the last thing I need is, by mistake, I one time leave I forget to turn on the cold water and I only turn on the hot water and then she can get burnt, right? So in my house, even if you leave the boiling hot water on boiling, it's not really going to be that hot. It'll be hot, but it won't be like scalding. However, in many homes it is that way. So you turn on the hot water, and now you have hot water with steam pouring out, right? If you have your tank on hot, then the hot water from the tap is very hot, right? It can even be steam coming up. And for sure, if you're taking from a percolator like this, right, like a hot water kettle, right, like we have here at Chabad for the tea and coffee, right? So then you should be careful not to pour from it directly into a into a fleshig or milchig pot. You have a pot that's meat. It's clean, but it's a meat pot because you used it for meat in the past, and like we spoke about last week, it's swallowed in the taste, right? So if you pour boiling hot water in it, what happens is now the first drop that comes in, steam goes up. That steam is fleshig steam, and it's going to actually make your whole percolator fleshig. Right now, that's not entirely true. It's not. There is a backup, which is the next time you pour hot water out of your percolator, that's now koshering faucet, right? Because you're pouring boiling hot water through it. But still, you should be careful not to do that because you never know what the first thing will be, etc. Okay? Yes?
My daughter, when I met my daughter, she has me pour like the first sip out. In other words,
that would be the reason for that.
And she just pours the first and then...
Very good.
And then
Did everybody understand what she said? So if you're using the boiling hot percolator or a faucet, which is on a boiling hot setting...
Or a teapot.
Or a teapot. Yeah, or a teapot, whatever. All these things, the teapot is a little bit different. But let's say a percolator, right? What many people will do is they'll pour a drop of boiling hot water, then throw that water out and start again now for their coffee or whatever it is. Right. Why? Because then you just koshered the thing. And now at home, okay, it's a nice thing to do that. But certainly, if you're going to 7-Eleven or you're in your hotel and you're taking boiling hot water from the regular boiling, you're allowed to use that boiling hot water, but you should always pour out a good half a cup or something and then start again. Like this, you're kind of koshering it right before you use it. It's a very convenient thing because the water in there is boiling hot, and that's how you kosher something, right? Right. So that's the way you do that. Okay. It's appropriate, if it's possible, to have a separate sink for milk and meat. If you don't, then either you should never wash your dishes with hot water, or you can have, like we have at home, and we still never wash it with scalding hot water, like I said. It's just warm water. But this is why, by the way, in my house, I don't let my housekeepers wear gloves when they wash the dishes. That's a policy that I have. What's the reason for that? Anybody want to guess? If you're not going to wear gloves when you wash dishes, then automatically the water will never reach scalding temperature because you're using your hands in there, right? Anyways, but even that's because we have two sinks, but it's one piece of steel. Right. Okay? Now, so even though it's two sinks, because it's one piece of steel, I don't want any hot water. I don't want any boiling hot water in there. And if I ever need to pour boiling hot water in there, like let's say the leftovers of the percolator after Shabbos, I put down something first. Ooh. Yes, excuse you. I'll put down like a piece of foil and pour onto it like that. It's not touching the sink directly. But another thing that I do is when she's washing the dishes, we have a milk, meat, and pariv, like a grate. Ours is made out of like what do they call it? Not rubber. It's like rubber, kind of rubber. Like a silicone. That's what I'm looking for, right? That goes in the bottom, and then the dishes are never really touching the sink because our sink is technically treif, even though we have two separate sinks. But it's one piece of steel that goes in and out, you know. So that's considered one sink for that regard. Okay.
What do you do with that? I have a grate. It's metal. It's metal grate. You have to. What can you do to keep it clean? Just wash it.
Do you have separate sinks?
No.
No. So then I use 3 separate grates. One for milk, one for meat, one for parv. And my housekeeper, as well as myself, we all know that when you're washing the parv dishes, you use the green one. And when you're washing the meat dishes, you use the red one. And when you're washing the milk ones, you're using the blue one.
So they don't
In fact, I never even really introduced my housekeeper to the terms. Obviously, she speaks Spanish. She was actually just here, Anna. She was helping out here this morning with the breakfast. I never even really introduced her to the words carne and leche. Like I was like meat and milk. I don't think she's going to get it. I'm going to explain to her the chicken is meat and that butter is milk. I'm not going there. I just call it blue and red. Blue, red, and green. She knows. In my house, the blue things go off the blue and the green things the green, the red the red. And by the way, it's extended to my kids. My daughter, when she asks me after she's still only 4 years old, when she asks me, where should I spill out my leftover soup that has, let's say, cheese in it, or my chicken soup, I just tell her the red sink, or the pink one. She likes to put the pink one because not everything's exactly red, pink, whatever. The pink sink or the blue sink, she knows, even though the sink is not pink and the sink is not blue, but she knows which one to pour it out. Okay. All right. I think we can end here for today. All right. This will conclude lesson 15. Our second lesson of milk and meat, where today we've done some of the precautions to separate milk and meat. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to all of you in person, and to all of those of you that are here on Facebook. Please do an extra mitzvah today, as we spoke about at the beginning of the feed. You can go back and watch it if you don't know what I'm talking about. Please do an extra mitzvah today in loving memory of Rabbi Tzvi ben Alexander HaKohen Kogan. And if you'd like to join us at 11 a.m., we are starting our rap club, which is the Tefillin Rap Club. For those that want to join us, take 5-10 minutes. Join us anytime between 11 o'clock and 11:30. I'll probably still be here till 12 o'clock. We'll put on Tefillin quickly in his memory. That would be a very special mitzvah. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.